All right, we're back on the Lag Bros channel. We got a good one for you today. We're back with the 2022 KLX300R, and we are doing an FMF muffler install today. It is the Q4 series. As far as I know, FMF might be the only one that makes a dedicated quiet line of mufflers. So we wanted to keep these bikes quiet. You know, they're mostly for trail use and around the house on private trails, and we just kind of want to keep them quiet. We had pulled the spark arrestor out of the existing muffler on this one. I'll show you that, what we did to cut that apart before, but we didn't really want to run without a spark arrestor, and the main goal was really just to reduce exhaust temperatures. We're not looking to really gain any performance out of this, just get rid of that hot muffler issue we've been having. If you haven't watched the previous videos, these mufflers get extremely hot. To the point where, you know, you might even be able to see on this one. We've already, you know, melted some of our boots and stuff on this. They stay hot a long time, you know, after they're ridden, so they take forever to cool down, and it's just a hazard in case it tips over on somebody. We don't want anybody getting injured just because the exhaust stays way too hot. So we're gonna try this FMF exhaust, this Q4, and we're gonna see if it makes a difference with the heat, and we'll definitely see how it sounds, and we'll compare it with the other stock bike that we have. We haven't done anything to this other one exhaust-wise. We haven't cut the spark arrestor out. It's completely bone stock. So we'll compare the exhaust tone to that one so you guys can hear it firsthand. FMF doesn't really send a lot in terms of instructions. Actually, they didn't send any. They do give you some decals, and there's a little clip that I'm assuming you'll need later on to fasten it to this particular model bike. You don't really need much beside metric Allen wrenches and some sockets. I think we've got a 12 and an 8, and we've got a 12mm open end wrench. That's pretty much all you should need. If there's anything else that I missed, we'll go over it in the video, and we'll get started on this and show you how it goes. All right, the quickest, easiest way is just first thing you got to do is get this seat off and out of the way. That's pretty much standard as far as anything on this bike goes. This is just a metric Allen wrench. Once I get this plastic off, make sure you watch these washers on there too, by the way. Once I get this plastic off, I'm going to have him pull the end cap off this stock exhaust, so that way we can take a look at what we did to that stock exhaust to modify it, in case you're interested in doing that. I can't really recommend it just because you do lose the spark arrestor function of that. So I don't think that's necessarily a great idea. Sorry about that, bud. I can hand that to you. So there's not much to these. The Kawasaki factory service manual recommends replacing the exhaust gasket in here. We're not going to do that. We're just going to be really careful taking this thing apart. Just make sure we can save that. And then there's 2 bolts here that mount on grommets. So those are going to have to stay pretty much the same. And this is where that clip from FMF is going to come into play on this bolt here, because the FMF muffler doesn't have a threaded insert to bolt this bolt into. All right, so what we had done originally, there's a gasket in here, which I just dropped. So originally how this was all put together was like so. This whole assembly was in there, and obviously this is your spark arrestor assembly, and everything went in with this gasket, and that's obviously what keeps the bike quiet and spark arrested. This has a huge impact on, you know, the noise of the bike, which you can see in the previous video what cutting that out does. I don't know if the camera can see it down inside that muffler, but the stock exhaust actually comes in down inside in the bottom of this, so it doesn't have a direct path out, you know, the actual tailpipe. So, you know, we noticed that obviously once we took this apart and pulled the spark arrestor out. So I think that's part of the reason why this exhaust gets so hot. So that's what we're hoping the FMF solves for us. All right, I'm gonna get these broken loose. These are the 12 millimeter bolts here. I gotta hold this one on the back side. I'm just gonna leave that there. I'm not gonna completely remove it just yet. In order to save that gasket, you're gonna wanna make sure that you're not, you know, twisting on this whole exhaust assembly as you pull it apart. You're gonna wanna make sure it comes straight out with that pipe, because that's almost, it's a really soft metal, that gasket. It's designed to make a seal around that, so you can damage it pretty easily. That is the stock setup. And actually what we might do later on is maybe we'll weigh this for you and we'll compare it to the FMF. Already it feels quite a bit heavier than the FMF. I'll show you this too. I don't know if you can see it, hopefully, if the camera focuses. There's a captured nut on the back side of this. The FMF does not have that, so that's where that little clip is gonna come in, like I was saying. All right, we had a little camera glitch there, so I'm gonna show you this again. Now the FMF doesn't have the threaded portion like the stock muffler does. So that's where this little black clip they send comes in. This is just gonna push over this tang on there. And then there's gonna be some, that'll give you your threads on the back side for when you fasten that. So we haven't pre-fit this or tested this in any way, so we're kind of showing you as we go and as we learn here. So once again, I'm going to try to be very careful. Actually, it looks like that exhaust, gonna grab that, bud? That existing gasket looks like it's gonna have to come right out of there. So I'm gonna pop this clip out of the way. That FMF exhaust is actually too big for that, that gasket in there. And that might be kind of a bear to get out of there. So what I finally did to get this thing out, because it's a bear and it's attached right in there, I pushed and just made a crimp in that all along that sleeve, just enough to distort it so I could pull it out of there. Now what you're going to want to make sure, if you do that and you have to be aggressive to get that seal out, just make sure there's nothing left in there. You know, you definitely don't want any pieces floating around, you know, especially the first time you fire this thing up. I did notice when I pulled the stock exhaust off that header was under a lot of tension. This header pipe where it's bolted to the engine, it was under quite a bit of tension when I pulled the stock exhaust off. All right, our new camera is glitching a little bit, so I'm gonna give you a rundown again of what I'm doing here. Now the stock header was under quite a bit of tension, you know, when I pulled the bolts off the old muffler. So, you know, it's gonna take some doing to force everything together where it should be. As you can see, I'm not quite lined up with this bolt. And you can see that header flexing a little bit. All right, so this is why we do this live, so you guys can learn as we learn. FMF doesn't mount their exhaust in the same spot as stock. The stock was mounted to the inside of these mounts, and this FMF lines up differently. So this clip, I had this clip on backwards. The threaded portion should be out to the right side of the bike. So once I set it up this way, you know, we tried this off camera. We tried a couple different positions. So on this outside, you know, the fitment is much better. Okay, so I jumped on FMF's website just to check. There are no instructions shown for this bike, which is pretty frustrating. But this bolt can't come in from the front side any longer because there's nothing to fasten it to. And it can't come in from the back side because the airbox is in the way. But the nice thing about the way they have these grommets set up, these little vibration grommets in here. They come right apart in halves. So the best way to get that in is start it in that half of the grommet, stick it through, then stick the front half of that grommet back in. And I apologize if we look like rookies doing this, but we're just doing it live, like I say, so we can learn together and show you that it can be done even if you don't necessarily know what you're doing right off the bat. So the other thing that's going to happen is if you want to reuse all the stock hardware, this bolt had a spacer on it, and now this is going to have to come in from the back. So that's going to stick in a little bit. I don't know if that's going to be an issue, like if you ever bottomed out the suspension. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go, through my nuts and bolts drawer here, and I'm going to see if I can find a shorter bolt to use in there, just so we don't have that sticking out into the wheel well of the bike. We're able to find a bolt that looks like it'll work lengthwise. It's about the same length as the front bolt in this. So I didn't have a metric bolt, so we'll just use this. But the important thing is that it is the same diameter, so it's not just flopping around in there. So go ahead and get this mounted back up. But before we do, like I said, we'll get this weighed for you. I think, like I say, I can already tell it's quite a bit lighter than stock, but I'll see if my scale will pick up the difference on these. We're going to weigh these quick before we install it on the bike. So I set my scale to 0 here, and I'll try to set these on there so they don't roll away. All right, now that one is coming in, I'm going to say it's between 7 and 8 pounds on that one. This isn't the most accurate scale, but this will give us a good idea. So that was between 7 and 8. We'll call that one 7.5. Now we'll weigh the Q4. Yeah, we're at 4 pounds on that one. Yep, we'll call it 4.5. So there's a 3-pound weight savings on the Q4 muffler from stock. So that is quite a bit of difference. I'm going to get this fitted up again here, hopefully for the last time now that we've weighed it. It's got some washers big enough to contact those grommets there. Actually, I have a nut with a washer, a little flanged nut here, so that one will be fine on this side. Just want to make sure I get enough threads. I did use a lock nut on this too. So I'm going to get this top one tightened up first. I'll get that one tightened right up where I want it. This will be the 12 millimeter from earlier, that bolt that we saved. And what I'll do too is I'll just make sure that this bolt isn't going to contact the plastics or be an issue. It doesn't look like it will. Okay, that's all tightened up. And actually the fit looks a lot better now. It's seated all the way in here, down at the bottom. That looks pretty good. And I'm just going to reset this clamp. I think the manual said about a 20 to a 40 degree angle, to set that clamp, just so you can get that nut tightened all the way. And they did give a torque spec on this too. I'm just going to tighten it by feel. But there is a torque spec in the Kawasaki factory service manual if you have one. They do have a torque spec in there for this bolt. What I'm going to do is we'll ride this bike, we'll get everything good and hot, and then we'll tighten everything up, you know, once it's hot, and bed it in, make sure everything stayed where it should. All right, so once that looks good and everything is fitting the way you like it, you can throw the plastics back on. Like I said, I'll just make sure that that's not interfering with the plastic. Yeah, we're quite a ways away. The only thing that you do lose this way with the Q4, I just noticed, they're these little plastic bumpers. One of them contacted the you know, the muffler mount on the stock muffler. You do lose that. Not that I think that'll be a big issue. Maybe if you fall over, it'll leave this plastic a little more vulnerable, but it'll still eventually bonk against the muffler housing itself. This has been a little bit of a disaster, to be honest with you. Didn't go as nicely as I would have liked it to, but we're, like I said, we're learning together, and it just shows that even if you don't have any instructions and you aren't sure what you're doing, if you just slow down, kind of take your time, be patient, you know, the solution will usually present itself to you. And now that you've watched us do it, hopefully you won't make the same mistakes. So this video, I guess, has been as much about what not to do as it is what to do. So the one thing you might need, you know, you might need to make a little trip to the hardware store if you're going to mount this muffler up, you know, yourself at home. You might have to go out and find a bolt to fit that that rear mount point on this. I was worried at first, you know, honestly, I thought it was a bad fit up from FMF, which would have been extremely unusual, and that was right. That's not the case. It is a quality fit up and a quality product from FMF as usual, and it actually looks pretty good now. It was just I was installing it wrong, and unfortunately they don't provide any instructions. So, all right, we'll take this outside and we're going to fire it up, see how it sounds, and we'll compare it to the stock bike and get some video of that so you can see what you think from the Q4 compared to the stock exhaust. We're outside with the stock KLX300R stock exhaust and the one that we just put the Q4 on, the FMF Q4. So we'll go ahead and fire up the stock bike, see how that sounds. All right, now here's the Q4. All right, so you can see it's a little louder, but it has a really nice tone actually. And the tip is turned down a little bit, so it's not shooting the sound straight up in the air. So it actually has a pretty decent tone. And that's about it, I guess. We will follow this up with a ride review. We'll tell you if it made any difference in power or anything like that. I don't think it's going to. I don't really anticipate that it would. You know, pulling the spark arrestor out didn't make a difference. So, but we'll give you a report on that, see if it makes a difference to how the bike feels losing that weight up top. And we'll keep you posted on all those results, and just stay tuned to the channel and we'll keep them coming.